A mystery buried beneath the sea, a tragic event recorded in the pages of history that shook the whole world. This is the story of the ship, once called the largest and unsinkable of its century. RMS Titanic. Friends, the Titanic's story begins in the early 19th century. At that time, there was a race between Germany and Britain to build ever larger ships. The British government decided to create a vessel whose size and decoration would surpass a luxurious palace. A ship to be the largest of the age. The government gave the White Star Line Company a multi-million-dollar loan to build that ship. Construction of the Titanic began on 31st March 1909 in Belfast, Northern Ireland. About 15,000 engineers and craftsmen worked for 3 years to construct a magnificent, luxurious ocean liner. The ship was built with 16 separate compartments that were completely watertight. Because of this feature, it came to be called Unsinkable. By April 2, 1912, the Titanic was finished. Its grandeur from the outside was matched, and even doubled, by what was inside. When White Star Line announced Titanic service between Europe and America, people were thrilled for its maiden voyage. On 10 April 1912, the Titanic set out from Southampton, England, for New York, with 920 passengers on board. It is said that over 100,000 people came to the harbor to see it when it was ready for its first voyage. Leaving Southampton, Titanic steamed at about 42 kilometers per hour to Cherbourg, France, where 274 passengers boarded. From there, it continued to Queenstown, now Cove, Ireland, where another 123 passengers boarded. And then, it departed on its final journey toward New York. When Titanic left Ireland, it received the first warning that an iceberg lay in its path. However, Captain Edward John Smith did not pay much heed to this warning and did not reduce the ship's speed. The ship continued slicing through the sea at or near full speed. By nightfall, Captain Smith had already received about 6 warning messages from other ships about ice, but he neither slowed the ship nor took those warnings seriously. Captain Smith was nearing retirement and wanted to add another record to Titanic's prestige. He wanted the ship to be not only the largest vessel but also one of the fastest of the century. On the night of April 14th, to keep watch for danger, Captain Smith assigned 2 crew members, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, to the Crow's Nest to alert him immediately if any hazard appeared. That night, the sea was completely calm. There was no moon in the sky, so they had only the faint light of the stars. Then, at about 11:39 p.m., Frederick Fleet in the lookout spotted a dark mountain directly ahead. At first, he could not immediately tell it was an iceberg, but soon realized it was a huge berg. He rang the lookout bell 3 times without delay, and then called by telephone to report, "Iceberg right ahead!" Hearing that, officers scrambled to turn the ship. The captain ordered maneuvers to steer Titanic away from the iceberg. Unfortunately, at 11:40 p.m., the ship's starboard, right, lower side struck the iceberg. The collision was violent and gave a big shock to passengers in 3rd class. People realized something had happened when the Titanic came to a halt and the engines were shut down. As the news spread, people began running about in panic. When the Titanic struck the iceberg, the impact torn the plates in the ship's lower hull. Keel's ribs protruded up to 300 feet on the starboard side. The plates slid apart and water rushed in. When the lower decks began to flood, all 3rd-class passengers tried to go up to the higher decks. Worried, Titanic's designer Thomas Andrews informed Captain Smith that 5 compartments had filled with water, and soon the water would overflow into the next compartments, one after another. At this point, the lifeboats were brought out, but at that time, Titanic had life-saving capacity for only about 20 lifeboats. The passage means the number of lifeboats present. Those boats could carry approximately 65 passengers each. In the panic, however, each lifeboat was filled with only about 28 to 30 people. Questions were raised about whether Captain Smith, responsible for the ship, knew how many passengers were aboard and how many lifeboats there were. Still, several boats were launched not fully loaded, and because of that, many people lost their lives. Terror reigned across the ship that night. Yet amid the chaos, a band of musicians, risking their lives, played on until the end, hoping to comfort those dying by giving them a few last moments of music. Meanwhile, as more than 5 compartments filled, the bow sank about 10 degrees, raising the stern. Under increasing stress at about 2:20 a.m., the Titanic broke apart midships. In only 2 hours and 40 minutes, the Unsinkable Titanic slipped into the arms of the Atlantic on her maiden voyage. In this tragic event, 1,517 people died. Most of them did not die from drowning, but from exposure to the freezing water, which was about 2 degrees Celsius. About 2 hours after Titanic sank, approximately 710 people had been rescued. Since Titanic's sinking, many theories have been proposed to explain why it went down. Some blamed Captain Smith. Others claimed poor design or inferior materials. But starting in 2010, a project set out to discover the real cause of Titanic's sinking. A research team used modern robots and high-definition cameras worth millions of dollars to scan a 15-kilometer area of the North Atlantic with sonar, making a map and collecting about 115,000 photos and videos of the wreck's pieces. After nearly 2 years of studying each fragment, the team in 2012 recreated Titanic virtually to try to determine the true cause of the sinking. After experiments on design and the materials used, the team found no fundamental design flaw, nor was the material of poor quality. According to this team's research, the primary cause of Titanic's sinking was her high speed. When she struck the iceberg at speed, thousands of tons of pressure struck the hull's lower part, damaging the stressed area. Water filled 5 compartments, and the bow sank. Today, Titanic's wreck lies about 600 kilometers off Newfoundland, Canada, at a depth of 4 kilometers. The wreck was searched for years until success came in 1985. Since then, more than 700 divers have visited the historic wreck site. The wreck was designated a century-old underwater heritage site, and its preservation is now overseen by the United Nations Cultural Agency to protect it from unscientific or unethical salvage. Well, it has only been 100 years. Note, the passage writes as if it had been 100 years. Maybe centuries from now the ocean will erase Titanic's traces, but no iceberg can sink the Titanic that floats in the hearts of millions. Friends, tell us in the comments how you liked today's video. If you liked it, please like and share.